So, thank you. Welcome to this NGI Forward Salon. With today, we're very happy to have Alicia Asín, CEO of Libelium.
Hi.
Hello, Alicia. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. So we have the format is that we have about 45 minutes to an hour, and that Alicia will have a presentation, and then we'll have a conversation. And I hope that the people in the chat will start putting in their questions. And that we will, but I'm sure we will have a vibrant conversation because we're at a vital moment in time, and this is what we are discussing, which is the barriers to adoption of IoT that is key at this moment. So, Alicia, I mean, we go back a long way. So I think the first interview that we had on Council was in 2012, and I remember then that you spoke about three things. You spoke about transparency in cities, and especially the need for involving citizens, which was very early, and I think still is a problem today. You talked about energy requirements being very, very important for IoT, which is basically the hardware. So you always mentioned the hardware very early on, and you were very, very consistent in talking about this. And then when I asked, I think in 2012, where you thought the next value would come from, you said, well, from the data, of course, the data of all the sensors are building these new services. So it's tremendously exciting now to hear what you think about what's happening today, 2021, which is basically a decade later, and you've been very, very consistent and very successful, I think, especially in the European context, in building the company, but also building a kind of narrative with the company, and that I think is congratulations. So over to you. So if you have your presentation, please. The stage is yours, Alicia.
Thanks very much, Rob. It's a big pleasure to be here, and especially with you, with people that has been following Libelium for such a long time. And it's nice to remember and to remember the key messages that we were throwing to the market almost 12 years ago. It looks like ages, and analyze what's happened, because a decade it's a lot. And so I will start. You were saying that I've been always very consistent on the hardware side, on the real side, and that's because when you look at what we are trying to build, what we are trying to achieve, this vision is not a virtual one. When we say we want connected cities, we want connected factories, we want connected homes, there is a very important part that will happen on the cloud and analyzing data, transmitting that data. But that's not going to happen without the T of the Internet of Things, that part of the hardware. And it's true that we've been very sensitive on that part of the T, because Libelium, it's providing particularly the hardware platform and all the ecosystem to connect anything to any information system in the cloud. But also that gave us a lot of reality from very early in the market. So when many companies were talking about theory, and they were just doing theoretical exercises of what would look like the ideal city, we were really participating in many pilots and proof of concepts projects, and we were facing the real problems. And I remember when we were in our prior conversation just a couple of minutes ago, you were remembering that I shared with you in 10 years ago the real problems that we were facing with the officials of a municipality saying, no, you cannot install sensors here in this street light because I'm the responsible of street lighting in the city and nobody has informed me. And and I share with you that because I was feeling that when you were, by that time, when we were attending conferences, we were talking about some kind of issues, and my reality was more down to earth and saying, well, when you manage to sign the contract, when you manage to persuade the city, then there's a ton of problems to executing that project that nobody's talking about. And nobody's talking about because only a very few companies in the world are really participating in real projects. And I think that's become an identity signal for Libelium, because we have this closeness to the hardware, to the real things, to the pilots and proof of concepts and projects of our customers. From a very horizontal perspective and a very global as well, we've always had a very global vision in multiple verticals of what was happening in this market. And it was in 2019 when all the companies, Microsoft, Cisco, the Gartners, and the major market analysts start to recap and review their papers. And what did we write 10 years ago that 2020 was going to look like? And it was like, oh, damn it, we miss it. And we did the same. We review what we were saying 10 years ago, and we were, well, pretty happy that we were consistent on our messages. We were the first ones talking about holistic and horizontal projects in cities instead of vertical approaches. And now we see that everyone is saying the same. But what's about figures, which is what we are all for? We all remember those big figures of those 50 billion devices by 2020. It was easy to dream big in 2010 about the billions, the trillions of devices that would be connected in 2020. And we've seen that, well, in some multinationals, what they've done has been allocating existing revenues, namely as SIM cards, not oriented for smartphones, for example, and say, oh, it turns that we have a big growth in IoT revenue. Well, it is, but it's not, right? And you know what I mean. So we decided with the same approach, we were seeing that many companies were asking customers and asking the market and doing their own reports. And we decided to do the same, our style as usual. And because we are horizontal and global, we interview a total of 250 companies all over the world with 2-3 participants per company, as you can see, because sometimes we interview more people inside a company, but different geographies or different verticals. In a total of 42 countries, and you can see some of the companies we were interviewing. And as always, we receive very interesting insights. And the first one is, and it's totally aligned. We wrote this at the end of 2019, but it's still relevant. And we made an amendment last year and an update, and we remain, we agree that the main conclusions are still the same. The first one conclusion is that the IoT market is still very fragmented. It's not only fragmented by verticals, as you can see here. You can see that industrial IoT and agriculture can be some outstanding markets, but still we are not identifying fast-growing markets where with killer applications that are the total winners of the IoT. And we've been talking with huge companies and multinational companies in the cloud business, saying that they are trying to identify trends and certain level of consistency in the kind of pilots they are developing, and they cannot identify any. They still see that it's very, very opportunity driven. The good news is that industry, agriculture, and water management look like the future winners and the reasonable winners for the IoT. And I think that and we can talk about this later, but the European funds, all the recovery plan for Europe, can really speed up this adoption in Europe and can really be a game changer, not only for the IoT market, but also for the productive and competitiveness of European companies. Secondly, projects, the level of the projects. Are we still in a POC world? And the answer is, unfortunately, yes. So 20% of the projects are still in that phase. But the figure I would remark here is that less than 12% of the customers are developing large projects. And as you can imagine, this hasn't changed with 2020 and the pandemic. And we were discussing this a few minutes ago as well. We were seeing that in all the media, we saw that everyone was talking about digitalization and about IoT and about speeding up the adoption of digitization solutions in their companies. Reality is, more often, is more related to use video conferencing systems and online calendars and just tools like Office 365 on the cloud to say that to say that we are going digital, which, well, it is digital, but it's not digitalizing your processes. It's starting using digital tools in your processes, but it's not digitalizing your processes. Let's repeat it. We're talking about fragmentation in terms of geography and in terms of vertical as well. And here you can see the impact of the fragmentation in connectivity. I've started in this business in 2006, and by that time, all related to wireless sensor networks, that was the cool name we have for IoT by then, was Zigbee. And it didn't look like it was going to be any discussion about it. That was their protocol of the communication protocol. And you have several flavors, different frequencies and different versions, but that was pretty much that. And with the time, we've seen that it hasn't been getting more and more fragmented. And we kind of saw that because even there was no discussion when we started, we always created modular architecture for our devices because we thought that connectivity shouldn't be a constraint for the projects, and that, well, maybe at that moment that was the most suitable technology for communicating devices, but in the future the technology could advance in different angles, and there could be necessary to connect with different protocols. And as you can see, it's very, very fragmented, and I would stand that Wi-Fi and cellular are the most demanded protocols. And I think it's curious that in our particular case of our company, we see almost a relation of 3-to-1 LoRaWAN versus Sigfox connectivity, which I think it's it's remarkable. And what I want to say here is that very often we are forgetting about politics in projects, and I don't mean the politics of that are in our governments. Not only that, and very often we cross technical against all the interoperability aspects in the project. So, for example, let's imagine that we have a project, a smart cities project in a city that recently has made an investment to create a Wi-Fi network, and they are looking to give content to that network. They think about installing some smart irrigation solutions in the city because they've seen the benefits of saving water in the city, and they directly write in the tender the devices will be connected by Wi-Fi. Well, you from a technical point of view may disagree and say, well, an LP1 technology would be more than enough for this, and you could save energy in this case. But, well, there is a reason that it's introducing this variable in the equation, and you cannot skip that. Or if imagine that there is a project that is where the system integrator and the leader and even the co-financial partner of the project is a telco. Well, in that case, for sure, we'll say that cellular is going to be the required technology. So when you see these numbers, don't keep in mind that this is the technical. This is only the real split of the in technical points, in technical terms, but also in force balance, I would say, of terms of the projects that are being developed right now. And talking about a different aspect, in the IoT we always have three elements, and we have parameters to measure. We need sensors, connectivity options, communication protocols to send those data out to the internet, and then we have the information systems. So let's talk about the sensors. And I think it's very relevant to see that when you answer this question, it's difficult to define the parameters to be measured in order to achieve the project goals. It really means technical companies are trying to solve problems from particular business they don't understand at all. And I mean, you have telcos or IT companies or technological companies trying to develop great solutions for AgTech, or to monitor or to make forecasts of pollution based on air quality devices. And they sell the project, they can see the benefits in the long term and in the big pictures, but then they lack of the expertise of the particular verticals. And I think that today that's the biggest gap we still have in the IoT. So especially, let's talk about the example of agriculture, for example. And I've been in many webinars, especially with the EU, discussing why, if we see that the act is so clearly beneficial for agriculture, why aren't we seeing a faster adoption? And the reality is that we have some technology, some tools in terms of sensors and devices and some set of connectivity options. And then someone has to transform those data into information. And who is doing that? Well, the answer is today, nobody, or only a few people. So that's one of the most important gaps that we need to cross in order to remove the barriers of IoT adoption. In terms of accuracy versus durability, and we keep talking about the sensors, that's also something that comes from the years where people were not paying attention to the T in the Internet of Things. I remember, and I think the best example is with gas sensors. When we started doing projects of air quality in 2012, more or less, the gas sensors that we were sitting with WASMOD were not calibrated and were very cheap sensors that were just offering the information of low, medium, or really high concentrations of that gas. Of course, those things are totally useless for cities. Then we launched, because our customers were demanding us, we launched calibrated sensors. And only a few customers could understand that those were significantly more pricey, and that if you really want to go and compare with professional existing solutions that are that come from the traditional SCADA systems, you need to increase the price and the quality of the sensors and decrease the number of the sensors that you are using. But 10 years ago, we were living in what I call the more sensors, the better. It looked like in cities, there was a relationship of direct proportion between how smart you were and how many sensors you claim that you have. I will install 20,000 temperature sensors in my city. Okay, congratulations. What for? What's the point of that? How accurate are those sensors for monitoring the temperature? Are they worth enough? Are they useful for anyone at your municipality? And that was pretty much all I have today. But I think that, well, I could talk during hours about this fascinating topic. So I think that I'm seeing a lot of questions and a lot of comments. So happy to jump on the discussion.
Thank you very much, Alicia. I mean, this is tremendously interesting and so timely again, sort of at this moment. So before I ask Gerald Santucci to come on stage and give a small presentation, and then we go to the chat. I think so. I noted sort of three things. So how to basically make this part of the EU recovery plan, sort of how to engage all of these insights for the recovery plan. Sort of this is also where the politics is sort of tied in. Then sort of this also can address the fact that less than 12% are large projects. Sort of so this recovery plan would sort of can actually address the fact that this large project. And this ties in with this insight that you bring, that so much of the vertical interest, things happening in the vertical, is opportunity driven, which is really shocking in a way. Sort of if you started this in 2006, we're 15 years into the market basically, and so we sort of a lot of the work is still not strategic. Sort of there is no sort of this is really sort of these sort of it's very important that you bring that. And then what is also quite amazing basically is the fragmentation in the connectivity that so there we have to ask, do we need guidance there? Or of course it's not writing in the tender that what it should be used, but should there be maybe from a European perspective some directions or some choices, some orchestration, sort of so I think, so what do you think about sort of this mix between about sort of the orchestration that could come from guidance or regulation, do you see there's benefits there that you could also want to contribute to?
Well, I think that we must remain connectivity agnostics, but I think, and I can foresee, and you can write it down now and check 10 years later if it's happening or not, that much of the funds from the recovery from the EU recovery plan will be used to deploy 5G networks. Do I think that 5G connectivity is the solution to IoT main problems? I don't think. I think it will be very beneficial for some use cases, and for some others, it will be neutral. But always that you have a big deployment of a certain technology, you see a lot of incentives to start using that new technology. So I think that we will see some kind of concentration in the future to cellular technologies for IoT as some kind of self-standardization, even without any formal regulation on that. That's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah. Yes. So maybe now, because we asked Gerald Santucci, who was head of IoT in 2009, around the same time when we all started, sort of. So Gerald, can you maybe put on your camera, because I think you are on stage, if you want, of course. And
can you
yes,
hear me first?
Yes, we hear you. So
but, can you see me?
Not yet.
And there? No, maybe it will come. Anyway, let's not waste our time. Good morning, if it's morning yet. Perhaps not for Jyoti, at least it's very morning, yes. Thank you so much, Alicia. I didn't know you, and I was very, very impressed by your presentation this morning. I'm Gerald Santucci. I have no role now in the IoT except talking and hearing, listening, and playing with it. Rob knows. I was first involved in the Internet of Things when I was working at the European Commission, now about 20 years ago, not exactly that, but I started to work on it in 2004 when few people had ever heard of the concept, which was invented or coined, at least not the concept, but the word was coined in 1999, as far as I know. It's not so long ago, and in a way, I always considered that for a concept to come true, it would take something like 20 years. If I compare what happened for other ICT in the past, there is always a long gap between the moment when the concept is created, when it's first talked about, and when it really comes into the mainstream of economy and society. So sometimes people say now, well, we have talked a lot of time about IoT, but where is it? And I understand that. Many people can be disappointed. It's true that in 2011, Cisco, Ericsson, and some others said by 2020 we would have 50 billion devices connected in the world. We do not have them, even if we can say it depends how you count, what are the sensors and other stuff that you take on board. It's not that easy. But in any case, we may consider that we have fallen short of the expectations. For me, and I would like to have your view on that, but for me, this is not too much a problem. So insofar as IoT as a concept, once again, exists only for 15 years or so. I've known Rob in 2009 in the Commission, and I mean it's only a little bit more than 10 years ago, and that may be long for us as individuals, always too long. But when you look at not the time as we perceive it as individuals, but the time of the economic machine, it's not that long. I would be more worried if, let's say, by 2025, the IoT would not appear to be in the mainstream society by then. We are not that far from it, but we are not yet exactly in it. Now we must also be aware of the fact that some concepts are not always living a long life. I will give you an example that I like. I was involved in the past in the concept of ambient intelligence. You have heard of that, of course, and it was in 1998, 1999, when that concept was invented in the Philips labs. And it was a lot liked and advertised in the European Commission when we launched the so-called fifth framework program for research and development. But it had actually a real life of 4 or 5 years. And then it disappeared. It does not mean that the work is not there anymore, but it's more in IoT, it's more in AI, it's more in other fields, but it's not ambient intelligence. And sometimes I wonder why some words, not the concepts again, but the words, they come, they have a peak, and then they fall down. And what was wrong with ambient? What was wrong with intelligence? And conversely, what has been right with Internet of Things? I have my own answers, but it's not that easy. Sometimes there is a psychological part of the explanation that we need to talk about in order to understand how things develop and strive.
Yeah.
Now, as I said, I'm not too concerned about the fate of the Internet of Things. I have two just things to say. One that you have stressed a lot: interoperability, and you put it very well, because I mean I was impressed by the number of connectivity protocols that you mentioned, cellular, LoRaWAN, Sigfox, etc., etc. We need to make them talk. It's not easy because the interests are extremely high and different. Also, the number of sensors. The word sensors in the IoT is something that came about 10, 12 years ago. We all know that the IoT was born from the world of the RFID. When it all started around 2002, 2003, the IoT was supposed to be the mere continuation of RFID tags. And of course, it was good that it came from there. But 20 years after, it's no longer there only. It's much broader. We have to take that into account. But probably one of the obstacles, if not the biggest one, is a lack of interoperable solutions. And you are fully right to highlight this. And there is a lot of work to do on that, which Libelium is doing. I'm sure I don't know the detail of what is being done, but I'm fully aware that it's extremely complex. And I can only thank you for doing it, because if you succeed, you will lift a major obstacle. The second and final remark I would like to say is that when we all talked about the IoT 15, 20 years ago, we talked of it as a block. Meanwhile, as you know, we have, and when that took place, there was not the 5G. There was not the new boost of AI. There was not blockchain. It was just the beginning of the massive volumes of data. So the world has changed. And perhaps today, IoT should not be taken merely as a block, as a discipline. It's something that makes sense only if it is smoothly integrated in the evolutions that have taken shape over the last 10 to 20 to 20 years. In other words, hoping that we can solve the interoperability issue, we have to hope also that work on IoT will not be isolated from the rest of the work in the ICT domain, but that it will be fully integrated with it. Voilà. So this is what I wanted to say at this point. But first of all, thank you so much for the presentation this morning, and thanks to Rob for having invited me.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic to have you also, Gerald, because basically of two things, and then we'll go to answering basically your question through somebody question in the chat, and then go back to Alicia. So Alicia started in 2006. It's a 15-year history. There's a history to this. We know that basically IoT can also be seen as nothing new. It's automation. It was pervasive computing in the 70s, ubiquitous computing in the 90s. With Mark Weiser, and ambient intelligence with Philips, IoT being coined by Kevin Ashton, coming from a product manager at Procter and Gamble, sort of coming from RFID. So this is indeed, it's important to have this kind of history because there's a history to it. And I'm very happy also to see that we have Norbert Strites in the chat and participating, because Norbert was very important and instrumental, still of course, but in the 90s when we had the first Future and Emergent Technologies programs called iCube and Disappearing Computer, and maybe hopefully next month we'll have a session on that with Norbert, but we'll talk about this later. But so basically the idea is, I think that at this moment is to show that I think what Alicia is also highlighting is that the lack of this opportunity-driven character of the space after all this time is really problematic. And sort of the lack of strategy. I don't want to immediately compare this to, let's say, the Asian places like in China and things like that, where we have this massive integration of spectrum management, application services, and infrastructure, which of course is a direction that is very, very careful to think about. It's not a direction that we immediately want. But this fragmentation and this opportunity-driven character of the space in Europe at this moment in time, I think is pointing to the fact, and as Alicia, you're pointing to this, it seems that for a lot of people, 5G seems to be the next logical step after IoT somehow, or in the IoT space. And I think you're raising the problematics of that very clearly, because there are a lot of problematics with that, especially in terms of energy, because sort of, I think it's been known that Huawei switches off their networks at night, because otherwise it just simply cannot power it, so actually what's more interesting, and what could be interesting, is that someone raises in the chat, David Mayo raises in the chat, and he says at the end, IoT and AI should be merging soon, because you can have all the data from IoT, but we need additional technology to take decisions based on the info. I guess AI will be a great partner for that. So what do you think about that direction, sort of that?
That's for Gerald or for?
Oh, for you.
Well, I think that I see a clear trend in the market demanding more powerful microcontrollers for the devices, aligned with that's being called fog computing, and that's because it's not sustainable in terms of energy. Again, the amount of data centers will need to keep powering in the future to analyze all the data that we will be producing with the sensors. The data produced by sensors is not sustainable, but also because it's not necessary. It's stupid to send the data to a cloud outside a country to decide whether you need to start or stop irrigating a garden. That's not logical at all. And I see that there is a trend in a change in the the architecture of devices that are being used for IoT. We've seen that many microcontrollers are more powerful now, are dedicated microcontrollers for IoT applications, and we also see that some companies are producing their own AI chips to be used in devices. The result of that is that we are changing a little bit the concept that we had previously of the IoT. We thought that was going to be billions of devices, and maybe part of the answer of why aren't we seeing so many big numbers is because, well, obviously the market is not advancing at the speed we expected, but B, we have more powerful devices and we are solving some of the problems with less devices. In the case of our particular case, one of our devices can connect up to 6 different sensors. It's like an IoT gateway. So I don't think when all those forecasts were made in the past, they were considering such a sophisticated devices. So I think that's definitely a trend, and devices will be more like an IoT gateway rather than a stupid sensor device with no capabilities of analyze the data.
So this is basically what you're talking about, this cloud and edge debate, and for computing and bringing analytics closer to the device, bringing this attempt at meaning and already giving the client some insights, bringing that actually closer to the local infrastructure that people are bringing. And does this also mean that does it have repercussions for Libelium as a company? That are you trying to bring these AI capabilities inside the company, or are you looking for partners, or how do you see the trajectory of Libelium itself when there's more intelligence added to these devices, which I think you also spoke about very early on, about a decade ago, when you also had all these cooking hacks kind of situation where you were really trying to bring some creativity to the use cases, which sort of was already happening then. Yeah.
Yes, it's true that we think that you have to listen to your customers and what the market is demanding, and obviously more powerful microcontrollers and more capabilities. We see that more and more our customers are pushing the limits of the architecture of our devices because they are trying to do these kind of things. So obviously that's on our roadmap to keep on providing a more powerful development platform. And I want to be very clear that we remain loyal to the vision of being a horizontal company, providing all the tools that will enable other companies to verticalize solutions. So our position regarding AI, for example, we will be launching very soon a new product for air quality, where there's an important part of AI, because as I was saying, it's very difficult to make high performance and very accurate data out of air quality with low cost sensors, meaning IoT sensors. The only way to make it close to the professional weather stations that can be ranging in the hundreds of thousands of euros is by correcting by artificial intelligence. But in this particular case, we will be using AI to correct and make more accurate the data that our own device is producing. So yes, for sure, we will keep enriching our devices with more capabilities in the future, and that's totally the roadmap.
Then there's a question from Desiree Milosevic exactly on that, and she says, Alicia, has the security side of more complex and powerful IoT gateway devices improved, or is the market demanding that? I think she's pointing to the fact, I think, that we're all aware that security has been quite a business trade-off in IoT or in IT basically for a long time, and it is this business trade-off. But sort of, do you think that there's a as the customers are pushing for the devices, are they also pushing for more security? Is that a demand that you see more?
I have a very short answer for that, and I wouldn't like to be superficial on such a critical topic like security, but I think that because most of the projects are still on a POC basis, I don't think that security is really included in the projects. It's something that you need to ask for as in your checklist, but in many cases, we don't see that's even implemented. And I'll give an example. If you are making a mock of a house, you don't install a real lockdown, right? Because when you are just showing how it will be, you just want to see the volumes, and you will have 2 bedrooms, and here is the kitchen, and of course there is a door, and you can open and close it. But you don't use it on the demo day. You don't say, and unless you have the right key and you introduce your biometrical data, you can access this house. That's for the production phase of the project. Well, I think that's quite a lot happening in IT projects.
Right.
You just want to know that in the event of making the project to the production phase, you will have all the mechanisms inside to enable, but you are not making the extra mile in development terms in the POCs. And as a result, I don't think that's been heavily tested right now.
This is I think these insights are really critical. Because it's so important to disambiguate the hype and the market and sort of the drive of the market from the actual real happenings on the ground, and that's where you are. And I think that sort of then in the company, when you hire people, sort of when you see new developers coming and new engineers, do you think that there's any type of education at the moment? Because we're 15 years into the space of, let's say, IoT, ambient, sort of. Do you see that? Do you think there's any sort of that the current engineering education sort of is actually? Do you feel that it's bringing people that have the right skills to be to operate in, for example, a place like Libelium at this moment, or is there a lot of internal work that's going on in order to educate or re-educate or de-educate the people that are working with you?
To get started, it's really hard to find qualified talent of any kind. That's number one thing. and it's a big drama that we as an industry, we are failing transmitting the need and the appealings of choosing a STEM career and I'm talking here for both men and women. It's even more dramatical for women, but we don't have either, so that's a problem. And if in some cases, some companies are already claiming that are slowing down some developments because of the lack of right people to take them to develop them. And I think that there's also a problem of we are at the beginning of a change of paradigm in education. I think that the careers are maybe too generalistic, and when I say that I'm a computing engineer, it looks like it's like I say I'm an internet engineer, which means it would be hard to say what does it really mean. What do you know? What have you really studied? Are you in the cloud, in the hardware, in the AI, or a little bit of everything? And because projects are so complex and have a requirement of so deep knowledge on the very particular topics, it's very, very rare to find people out of the university with a big expertise on AI, with a big expertise on cloud. So you always need to train them. I think that in the future, we will see a different model in education, and university will be a place when we where instead of going for 5 years and we are done, it'll be a place where we will continue going up and back. We'll be back and forth to continue renovating our knowledges and say and working in a maybe in a Scrum way. I'm making a sprint to get acquaintance in AI. So I'll be learning for 6 months in a very intensive way. And then I'll be very, very attractive and useful for many companies.
Yeah.
And then some advances in the market learn that there is some important upgrades in the knowledges of that AI basic course that person did. And maybe that person wants to come back and be able to be eligible for further positions. So I think that's more logical because we all need to recycle ourselves.
Yeah, I think sort of I'm fully with you here, and also I think so. This ties in with the continuous learning. It also ties in, I think, with the ideas for bringing this in a kind of narrative way to the recovery sort of plans, because it's all there. Then there's a question from Ken Foster. From great to have you here, Ken. But the presentation sort of this platform is recording, so you can record it, you can view it back after I think 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and then it's going to be on the YouTube channel. And I also asked everyone if we could send them a short report of this session, which is sort of the report that me and Gail Lagar are making, and then we'll add some links to that. So if that's possible, then if it's okay with you, Alicia, for 5 more minutes, there's a question from Gerald.
Okay.
And I think you basically already spoke about that, and you spoke about that, I think, very early years ago, also in some European venue, where you basically said the biggest problem I have right now is that we cannot get the city managers to open the streets because they're not aligning sort of the work that's being done. So Gerald is asking, what are the biggest obstacles to deal with city managers in a relatively long time frame? So sort of these obstacles, and so what are you? This is, I think, going to the kind of the same observation that Cisco had sort of basically a while ago, that they stopped selling their smart city platform because they couldn't sell it any longer. They couldn't find the counterparts in the city government that would buy it. So there's still, of course, any offerings on a more vertical level, but sort of, so what do you see there happening? Sort of what would be?
Well, I think that most city managers have already understood the horizontal part of the problem, and are starting their homework in a better way than 10 years ago, and saying, well, it's not the CIO smart cities project, it's not the IT guy smart cities project, it's the city smart cities project, and we are all a team. It's, well, like in a company. Problems I've seen here that, well, for some periods of time that got better, that improved, and we saw more communication with different departments in a city to write their needs and try to define a general system instead of trying to hire and buy things. But, well, people change in political cycles in cities, and that there's less stability in public administrations than in private companies. In private companies, you always have one vision, and unless you change the CEO, you always keep the same path. That's not the same in cities. And the political situation has been more convulsed in the past years than it was 10 years ago. We've seen more fragmentation in the governments, more mixed governments, and more changes in governments as well. And that's not beneficial, because you add more conversations to the equation, and it shouldn't import, but they really limit. Because if you have one, the person from handling the waste from working from an opposite party to the person handling the streetlights, for example. It's not even up to them to make a commitment. It's about their party saying, well, it's not our moment to lead this project, or it is a moment. So it's very complicated.
Yes, I understand completely. Sort of the fragmentation of the authorization of all these different departments in these cities is amazing. We have a question, or basically a remark. I think that's very timely and good. Sort of Patrick Rateau is saying, isn't the fact of the current market being driven by opportunities also resulting from uncertain REO of the projects of all these POCs, basically? So it's a paradox. So paradoxically, we live in a world of abundant money, but increasingly risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
I think this you can only say yes to this, I guess, right? Sort of.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put that in words. And it's the problem is not only about the money; it's about the human resources. And let's imagine, think of a bank as companies that we identify with lots of resources. When they started their digital strategy, you always see a press release with this bank, the Bank of Santander, for example, has hired this big name to lead the digital transformation of the company. And that's always a person with a team, a cabinet, and lots of resources. Because it's hard to drive digital transformation. Now look into the end users of agriculture, for example, and think about the farmer. The farmer is doing the real job on the farm. It's also very often handling the accountancy, the paperwork, and all those things. And you say, well, this is very cheap. You have sensors, and you can reduce the fertilizers, the amount of water that you are using, and it's just ready for you. Why don't you buy it and install it? And there might be some kind of fiscal incentive. There might be even some kind of grant for you to acquire this material. Why aren't you doing this? And the problem is, when do you expect me to do this? I don't have the skills, I don't have the knowledge, and it's not only about giving me all this material. I need the digital transformation leader of my farm to put all those things in place. So I think that's the gap we are missing. It's a human resources. When are we physically installing this, and when are we physically dedicating the time to transform our existing processes with the new technology?
No, I think, and also what you were saying about the lack of security in the beginning of the project is getting real. Of course, people are saying, like Joti is saying, and Gerald, and also Norbert are saying that all these requirements should be part of the beginning of any kind of thinking of such a project. Which, of course, the problem then is again what you point to, and what I think that the research that you've done is so important. And I think the good thing about the study and the research and the report is that it comes from you. So of course it has tremendous credibility coming from a source that's actually doing all these things, sort of that's actually in the market doing this. And then you point to the fact that it's only 12% of these large projects in which people can actually think about things like security. So I think you've really touched on a few very, very fundamental points that we'll try to write down and then sort of frame in a policy context, so that we can bring it as the next generation internet strategy team to some of the units, and of course are aware of all these issues, but they all find it very difficult to find ways to address them. So maybe a last quick question is from Andrei Filipov. And he's asking more, I think, about wearables. So he's asking more, what about the IoT on the body? What about the IoT? We don't want to go there with Elon Musk in the body, but hopefully. But what about sort of like the more intimate sort of like health and wearables and sort of, do you see, of course, maybe with COVID now, do you see things happening there? Sort of.
Well, I think there is a real need that was really well exposed during COVID. Should we have better e-health devices in home, we could have increased the bed space in our hospitals, and we could send people back to their homes without staying occupying the emergency rooms of our hospitals, and keep controlling them in the distance. And sometimes that's better. That's cheaper. It's better for you as a patient because you are in your house and you are more comfortable than in a hospital, and it's better for everyone. The biggest problem I'm seeing with wearables in the near future is that with COVID, what I've seen is also a raise in privacy awareness, and suddenly, and we see that all the radar COVID and tracing apps have been a total failure. All of them. I haven't heard of any success, and that's because average citizen, we are trying to advance average citizens from being in diapers in digital terms to dominate the levels of privacy. So when you try to put so many things new, you get the reverse reaction of fear. I'm not educated enough. The only thing I'm acknowledging right now is that maybe I'm not skilled enough to understand the privacy implications of using this service. So I'm saying no. Because I'm not seeing that clearly. And that's been the most frequent answer I've received from all my environment. And I think that's something that we as an industry will need to work on. If the regulations are not in place, then it's industry the one that has to align messages, explain privacy in the same terms always, and work on maybe IoT labels, privacy labels, to make it very, very easy to understand.
Yes, there's also work on this, also from Peter Bear and ThingsCon community on the IoT trust mark, and people are working on it. It's very important. I fully agree. And again, I just want to say that how consistent you are, because this is what you basically talked about also 10 years ago, 15 years ago, to bring citizens into the loop. And our failure as an IoT community to have done that in the past 20 years, which is a general failure of all of us. Of course, we all had to work and build businesses and sort of but yes, sort of it's been a kind of collective thing that's now coming back to haunt us, because it's also how I feel in the past 20, 30 years, how IoT, which basically I see as accountability and transparency and decision making, quite generic and quite neutral in a sense, of course, is based on all kinds of decisions that you make on data, is being taken up either by big tech or big government. It's become entangled in this control paradigm, and it's very difficult to disentangle it. But it's very important that we try that now, because people are throwing away the kids with the bathwater. And like you say, they are basically now refusing all kinds of information about their own health that could also be played back to them. So it's actually, it could be like a very good learning tool. Thanks a lot, Alicia. It's been a fantastic hour, and congratulations again on the report and on the great work. So let's check back in 10 years time.
Let's see. And hopefully we'll see each other sooner with maybe with a beer.
Definitely. Oh yes. I think of course Barcelona and IT World Solutions, that was of course an important venue. Always, it is an important venue. They're trying to get back on track. I hope let's all go there. So thanks to Elon Tech, our partner, for doing this. Thanks to all participants. Thanks to Gerald Santucci for his insights. And so this will be recorded and can be reviewed back. Do all go and get the report from Libelium, and we will write a short sort of policy kind of report on this, and hopefully put your voice where it matters in policy circles. So thanks a lot, Alicia, and thank you all for joining, and have a great day all, and we know what to do. Back au boulot. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.